There are many British planes out there that are a complete joke with an abysmal history botched through years of failures, budget cuts, and hilarious crashes. But just like the Harrier video a few months ago, people don't realize that these planes, while maybe not being that good in real life, are still some of the most fun in-game to be had. I've actually wanted to make this video for quite a while now because I love flying these things in-game. And now that people on the Discord server finally voted for it, I present to you, without further ado, the Panavia Tornado family. The Panavia Tornado is a multinational family of twin-engine variable geometry multi-role flying cinder blocks available in the Interdictor, Nuclear Strike, Interceptor, Fighter Bomber, Electronic Warfare, SEAD, and Recon roles, where it fails very spectacularly at almost all of those jobs. The Tornado shines today as both a meme in the community and also a very fun plane in the skies of War Thunder, with people loving to shit on these things for how badly they fly, how artificially nerfed their weapons and avionics are, and how stupidly simple their playstyle is on paper. In turn, sparking some serious controversy time and time on the forums. So whether you are John Panavia himself, or just a new poor soul who doesn't know any better, who wants to fly the Tornado for the first time for some reason, then saddle up for the wild ride down Tornado Alley. Once upon a time, a long time ago, in a faraway land known as Hell, France and Britain wanted to build the ultimate next-generation fighter, interdictor, interceptor, all-in-one super-duper giga-chat plane. Using the highly advanced technology of its time, called variable sweep wings, the Eurotards didn't want to be outdone by the American F-111 and the Soviet Se-17. So after Britain had cancelled their super-advanced high-tech variable geometry interdictor due to price cuts, and then 2 years later cancelled the collaborative replacement project with America to modify their overpriced advanced multi-purpose high-tech bomb truck for British use due to budget overruns again, in 1967 Britain decided that third time is the charm, and deciding to keep things local, approached France instead to start work on the AFVG, or Anglo-French Variable Geometry Aircraft, a story as old as time, which you already know how it ended if you watched the Mirage 2000 videos in the past. The AFVG program was an even faster failure than the F-111K British Aardvark or the TSR-2, and as we have learned throughout history, the French and the British don't really get along, and when they do, they come up with actual abysmal dogshit since neither country can cook. Literally. Anyways, so after Britain flunked on their third attempt at a supersonic advanced high-tech variable geometry bomb truck, Britain finally realized that this idea doesn't fucking work, and it really sucks, and maybe they should stop thinking about building. So the Brit-bonged bigwigs at the British MOD decided that the fourth time is the charm, and to replace the 3 failed attempts at a variable geometry bomb truck, they got to work on an even more expensive variable geometry bomb truck. Do you know the definition of insanity? Insanity is doing the exact same fucking thing over and over again, expecting shit to change. So, realizing that they can't do this shit alone, or with 2 countries, they decided to do it with 3 countries instead. So, the Panavia company was formed as a conglomerate collaboration between British BAE, German Airbus, and Italian Leonardo, some of the largest defense giants in Europe, to collaborate and help each other in creating this ultimate aircraft. There was also supposed to be Belgium, Netherlands, and Canada, but shit hit the fan real quick with the former and they pulled out of the program before anything was set in stone, since France offered them the Mirage 5BA, a plane that did basically the same job at a quarter of the price. The Netherlands pulled out after realizing the Tornado was too expensive, complicated, and flew like a brick with wings, seeking something more affordable and, most importantly, more maneuverable than their old F-104s. Their pleas were answered shortly after, when the Americans offered them the F-16 for export. The Canadians were by far the most based. While the Canucks were just being the average Canadians, their stripped-down nuclear suicide truck F-104 with no guns, missiles, or proper navigation systems intended for one-way trips to deliver nukes was somehow deemed better than whatever the new MRCA program would create. You know, as much as I like to shit on the Canadians for their incredibly bad decision-making and hilarious blunders in aircraft design, I gotta give them credit for this one. Calling a boneless F-104 a better strike interdictor than the Tornado really says heaps about how this program was shaping up. Anyways, now that the Panavia company was formed and the three countries got ready, the development of the MRCA project finally started. And it was a complete fucking internal disaster from the beginning, being riddled with budget cuts, developmental stopgaps, technological hurdles, and some of the funniest design flaws and stories I have ever seen on a plane yet while doing research for these videos. And of course, multiple lawsuits between the companies and Panavia working on this thing, but we'll get to that in a second. I just want to start off with one of the funniest stories I have read in a while. One of the first problems they faced by the Tornado's design was iterated in a nice story by Jim Quinn, the senior programmer for the Tornado development simulation and software. Basically, the first Tornado prototypes were easily capable of reaching supercruise speeds, but the Turbo Union RB199 engines of the Tornado initially had a severe safety flaw. You see, the early Tornadoes had a problem where at high altitude, if the aircraft decelerated suddenly, the low-speed turbines in the compressor did not provide enough pressure to hold back the combustion airflow, so the engine would do a certified MiG-25 at Mach 3 moment, just not at Mach 3, and yeah, it literally blew itself apart from the insides. So instead of fixing this problem with the engine during deceleration, in typical British fashion, British BAC just put a computerized limiter on the throttle that increased the minimum throttle you can set depending on your speed. Now, as anyone with more than 2 brain cells can already see, this is not going to work. The Brits found out the hard way when the speed limiter on one of the prototypes got stuck at such a high setting that it was basically stuck at full military power, or 100% throttle without afterburner, if it was going above Mach 1. This almost ended in complete disaster when one of the prototypes just couldn't slow down because of this hilarious design flaw, being stuck at full throttle just because it was going too fast. Kinda not the thing you want to do when you want to slow down. But anyways, after doing multiple high G turns to bleed speed, something the prototype airframe was never supposed to do, it managed to be salvaged. Another incredible story from the development of the Tornado was when one of the 3 companies working on it tried suing the other companies for stealing designs, for a part of the plane that they were all working on together. I really don't know how stupid you have to be to do this, but considering that these companies were building the Tornado, I think we already have the answer to that. Anyways, the story goes that Ted Talbot, the guy from the Concorde development team, was assigned to create a Concorde-style variable geometry air intake for maximum supersonic airflow efficiency on the Tornado. However, after the Concorde's secret technology became not so secret anymore after the Soviets stole it and built the fastest practical joke in commercial aviation history, the British became even more open to the Concorde's technology and handed it over to the Germans and the Italians to see what they can cook with it for the Tornado. After a few months of tinkering, the Germans couldn't figure out their ass from their elbow on how any of this shit works despite being given literal step-by-step documentation from the British. And this is where the funny part starts. The Germans were so fucking lost and had so little clue what the hell they were even making that they thought that their copy of the patented Concorde's intake was a unique design, and decided to not only file their own patent for it, but then they also sued the British BAC engineers who invented this intake for somehow stealing the design. Yes, the same engineers who gave the Germans the designs for the intake in the first place. Enough of the funny long stories now. I think you're starting to get an idea of how smooth and well-planned the development of this new plane was. Anyways, the super-duper funny swing-wing strike interdictor was riddled with absolute fumbles like these, and it only got worse from here. From losing multiple prototypes because the engineers somehow forgot to tell the test pilots the slightly important detail that the autopilot literally didn't work, to slightly more severe oopsies, such as the head of Messerschmitt in West Germany literally giving away the Tornado's details and specifications to KGB agents, practically removing any secrecy or technological advantage it had against the Soviets. And it's also funny how the Soviets never tried building their own, that's how bad it was. But anyways, all before it even entered production. See, shit like this and much more showed that the Tornado was plagued with a lot of accidents and failures that can best be described as comically large oopsies. Oh yeah, did I ever tell you guys about the complete joke that is the Panavia official website? No? Oh boy, look at this shit.
Bruh, Look at this dude. Wait till you see the. No, 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 no. Look at the top of his head. Look at his lips. Back of his neck looked like a sirloin steak burger. Oh, he tried it. Oh.
Anyways, 10 years after the cancellation of the AFVG program and the birth of the MRCA program, the first production order for this new plane, now called the Panavia Tornado Interdictor Strike Aircraft, or Tornado IDS for short, officially entered production in July 1976. These Batch 1 aircraft had a few teething issues that took some time to actually fly, with the first real production Tornado performing its first flight a full 3 years later and finally entering service in 1979, Panavia sought for foreign customers to try and shoulder the immense cost of this overpriced shit brick. Sadly, people were usually smart enough to realize that this thing was an abysmal pile of shit, being able to do much less than, let's say, an F-15, for literally double the price. That is, unless you are an incredibly stupid oil money baby who has more dollar bills than brain cells and don't know what to spend it on, and just buy whatever Britain sells you. Retarded children should not be judged for their actions, however, and before Abdullah types his 10 paragraphs of cope in the comments, I want to point out that I temporarily lived in Riyadh for 8 years and got to see these Royal Saudi Tornadoes fly over my head at air shows over a decade ago, so I think I'm allowed to make fun of them now. Anyways, making fun of the tornadoes aside, this new strike interdictor, the Panavia Tornado, was now ready to enter service with the triad of countries it was developed by, and this is the beginning of the Panavia Tornado story. The first iteration of the Tornado family comes in the form of a ground strike interdictor, which has multiple different names depending on who was flying it. The base designation was the Tornado Interdictor Strike, or IDS as used by the Germans and the Saudis. The British, however, wanted to standardize its name with the RAF designations, and called it the Tornado GR, which stands for Ground Strike and Reconnaissance. You know, just like the Harrier GR, or the Jaguar GR. The Italians called it the Tornado A200. I don't know what the fuck that was supposed to stand for, or what standardization it was supposed to follow. Just don't confuse it with the A200. Or the A200. Or the A200. What the fuck, Italy? Anyways, now is a great time to explain the 3 battle ratings the Strike Tornadoes sit at to avoid confusion later in the video. When I say early Strike Tornado, I mean the 11.3 ones. 2 in the German tree and 1 in the Italian tree. These do not have any guided air-to-ground ordnance, with the exception of a small quirk we'll talk about later. And as such, they are the lowest BR tornadoes in-game. Then, we have what I call the midlife Strike Tornadoes. These sit at 11.7 and are usually a midlife upgrade, such as the ASSTA 1 Standard or the 1995 upgrade package for the Italian Tornado. These have access to great targeting pods and a plethora of guided ordnance, including GPS, laser, or TV weapons depending on the nation. Finally, we have the late life upgrades, such as the GR.4, ASSTA 3, and other funny models. As of the first iteration for the script when making this video, none of these are in-game except for the GR.4 and technically the ASSTA 3. We'll get back to that part in a bit. These late life models are characterized by their access to advanced pods, missiles, and avionics, such as the late life/3 series PGMs, that we are very fond of since last video, for example. So now that we got that out of the way, the first of these models I wanted to talk about is this one right here. This is the Tornado IDS. Just the IDS, nothing else. It's an early model of the ground attack Tornado found in the Italian tree at 11.3, and with a reskinned copy-paste as a German premium at the same BR in the form of the WTD-61 premium. These two planes are 100% identical. WTD-61 is just a test and evaluation squadron, and the German premium just has the cool skin of that squadron. It's kinda like how the F4 EJ ADTW is a complete copy-paste of the Tech Tree EJ, just with the skin from the Air Development Test Wing, or ADTW for short. The Bundeswehr Technical Center for Aircraft and Aeronautical Equipment 61, also known as, yeah, I'm sorry to all German speakers watching this, that's gotta be my least favorite disability, I'm not pronouncing this shit. Anyways, basically what I'm saying is, the German Premium Tornado and the Italian 11.3 Tech Tree one are completely identical, minus the camo. The 11.3 German Event Tornado is also almost identical, but we'll get back to that in 1 second because of one small difference. The 11.3 Tornadoes have no guided ordnance whatsoever, only being viable as carpet bombers in ground battles, or base bombers in air battles if you're a boring person. In the air-to-air department, you get a whopping grand total of 2 whole AIM-9Ls, which on a supersonic airframe at that BR is not bad, but also not good. You also have incredible guns, being the Mauser BK-27 with the funny ammo belts, but even with the radar lead indicator, good luck actually getting nose on target in this fat fuck. Enough offense, let's talk about defense. For the defensive suite, you actually get one of my favorite ones in game, the twin BOZ pods. Yes, these are directly related to the BOL pods found on various other aircraft in game. So basically, the BOZ pods are these little pods that go on the wingtips, and in the back you have 28 conventional countermeasures in each pod, meaning with both pods equipped, you get 56 flares. And yes, you're gonna want to bring full flares on these and no chaff, because well, the other half of the BOZ pod is a giant chaff-only electromechanical dispenser carrying the small amount of only 600 chaff in each pod. With both pods equipped, you get 1,200 chaff at all times in this plane, and in all the other ground strike Tornado variants. My favorite thing to do in the Tornado is fly however I like, straight into the enemy, and whenever a Phoenix or R-27ER is fired at me, well, I have a little macro on my usual chaff button that makes me dump about 100 chaff per second. So, the second I see a Phoenix or a MiG-29 on my RWR, I just tap this button once without even having to notch or turn cold, completely negating any incoming radar missile. It's really funny, and this allows you to slip past enemy lines on the stupidest and least expected ways and just throw AIM-9Ls at them from above. Goose losing his shit in the backseat of the Tomcat watching the tornado-sized object on his radar turn into a small country as soon as he fires a Phoenix. That is, for the other Tornadoes mostly though. At 11.3, these early Tornadoes don't even face Tomcats or MiG-29s at 12.7, so surprisingly, despite being literal flying bricks, the 11.3 Tornadoes are very forgiving and very survivable for their battle rating, especially against the radar missile spam from the MiG-23ML and F-4S Wallet Warrior monkeys. And even without a macro, just spamming chaff everywhere you go is also a viable strategy. The US Air Force literally called it the chaff corridor back during Vietnam. That's how good it was. Anyways, so how do you play these things? Well, for the Italian one...
Top gear, top tip, avoid.
But it is beautiful.
Yeah, you're just the over-glorified F-104 with enough chaff to ignore any radar missile thrown at you, but good luck stock grinding this thing in the first place. Why even do it? Just one BR step higher in the Italian tree, there's a much better Tornado that we'll talk about in a bit, so please just go fly that instead. As for the German premium one, well, please don't buy this shit. Even on sale. It's not worth the money. Who the fuck spends $45 on a Tornado on sale? I'm not even gonna bring up the $70 normal price tag. However, if you got this thing for free as a gift like I did, then honestly, it's not a bad premium. The optimal base bombing loadout in this thing to grind is full 1,000 pounders on the bottom racks, 1,000 pounders under one wing, and a drop tank under the other, plus the usual sidewinders and the funny POZ pods. You see, it takes 5 of these bombs to destroy one base, and with the Tornado's incredible amount of chaff and nice top speed, you can easily get 2 bases with this loadout. Now for the kicker, if you turn around and run back to your airfield like a pussy after getting the bombs off, I hope you get packet loss and crash into the ground every game. As I said during the Phantom and the Mirage 3 videos a few months ago, I have no problem with people base bombing in their premium to grind faster, as long as they benefit the team and go fight other planes after they get their bombs off, instead of running off like pussies and losing the game. Now granted, the Tornado isn't a fighter like the F-4S or the Kfir Canard we covered previously, but as someone who has owned this thing for a few months and played it extensively, it's in no way that bad of a plane in the air-to-air role, especially considering 90% of the shit you'll be facing is retarded children in their MiG-23MLs and F-4S Phantoms. AIM-9L in rear aspect at close range is a very lethal weapon against those hot airframes, and since the massive flight performance buff the Tornado has gotten in the Dance of Dragons update, this thing isn't to be slept on. Yes, you will lose most dogfights you enter, which is why you shouldn't be dogfighting in this thing in the first place, but gone are the days of being a literal brick, and now you can actually turn hard enough to evade some stuff you face. And of course, there's also a big thing about all the Tornadoes that makes them one of the most fun planes in game in my opinion. But I'll save the best for last and come back to that later in this chapter of the video. Now let's talk about the Marineflieger. This is a special variant of the Tornado IDS used by the German Navy for anti-shipping, primarily using the AS-34 Cormoran anti-ship missile, a giant, slow, subsonic telephone pole with no maneuverability and a few 100 kilograms of explosives stuffed inside. It has no proximity fuse, and despite all the shit I just said about it, it's very good at its intended role of popping enemy ships open, especially since Gaijin finally fixed the broken guidance on this thing 2 full years after adding it, just in time while I'm working on this video. Basically, for the past 2 years, it used to aim for the center mass of a ship's silhouette, which, for most ships, is just empty space. But now, 2 years after being added, it actually aims for the ship itself, so it actually works now. These missiles have active radar guidance, like an AMRAAM or a Phoenix, just against ships, and technically planes too. They use a basic pulse wave seeker, however, so a single drop of chaff will always make them miss. 2 years ago when they were first added, they didn't work against ships correctly, as we said, but there was a very funny bug that made them work against planes at all altitudes. And this used to be, by far, the most fun Tornado in game, because you got 4 fire and forget deleters with 35 kilometers of range to absolutely remove any planes landing on the runway. In fact, I made a whole video on that back then, of just popping people on the runway with the Cormorans for 8 minutes straight. That's how fun this was. Sadly, this bug has since been fixed, and today, as of this video, it's literally just a copy-paste of the German premium Tornado. Just not premium. And with gimmick missiles that are useless outside simulator battles, since Gaijin removed aircraft carriers and ships from ARB maps a few years ago. And being an event vehicle, of course, console players basically will never have a chance to get this thing again except from seasonal gambling crates. As for the PC players with marketplace access, please don't. For the price this thing goes for on the Gaijin market right now, it's not worth getting. Just, if you really want a Tornado, go pick up the premium one and a year premium account for even less than this thing costs. All in all, it's merely a novelty item today, with the most fun to be had with it being relaxing in sim on the Denmark map and sinking enough AI British vessels with your anti-ship missiles to legally qualify as an Argentinian Air Force pilot. Gaijin, please add the Exocet missile for the Super Tendard, I'm begging you. Anyways, now with the 11.3 Tornadoes out of the way, let's move on to the upgraded 11.7 ones, starting with the German Tornado IDS ASSTA 1 to finish off the German Tornadoes. Basically, in the year 2000, German Tornado IDSs underwent this program called the Avionics System Software Tornado Advancement, or, according to another source, the Avionics System Software Tornado in ADA, which just rolls off the tongue easily, as you can see. It's abbreviated ASSTA for a reason. Anyways, this was the first ASSTA upgrade, and there is 2 more of these later in the Tornado's life, but none are in game yet technically? Watch Gaijin add ASSTA 2 or ASSTA 3 after I finish this video. Or maybe not, I'll explain why in a bit. It's not like this will be the first time they do this shit. So, the ASSTA 1 is essentially the same Tornado we just talked about, but with the Lightning II thermal targeting and laser designation pod. Thanks to this pod, the ASSTA 1 can now bring 1,000 pounders and 2,000 pounder paveways. And of course, the 1,000 pounder LJDAM. I must point out, however, that the ASSTA 1 did not have JDAM compatibility in real life. That was actually the ASSTA 3 that had it. So this Tornado is a mix of multiple variants in-game. Or maybe not, since the modification to unlock the LJDAMs on this thing is literally called the ASSTA 3. Anyways, in addition to all the unguided slop that the older Tornadoes got, these guided bombs are the only upgrades you really get. So besides that, there's not really much of an upgrade unless you're one of those specimens who play ground battles. Ew. Moving on, to also finish off the Italian strike tornadoes, this is the Tornado IDS model 1995, which is just a 1995 upgrade package for the Italian Tornado IDS. What the fuck were you expecting? It's in the name. Anyways, it's literally the same as the ASSTA, just without the JDAMs, so your only upgrade is the paveways. Also, instead of the Lightning II, you get the French CLD Pod, which isn't much of an upgrade or downgrade really. Besides that, it's literally the same as the earlier tornadoes we talked about, just 1 BR step higher because of the better ordnance. Now for what is arguably the best 11.7 tornado, the British Tornado GR.4. This is the first iteration of the strike tornadoes in RAF service and in-game sits at 11.7. This variant depicted in-game is a midlife upgrade with the TLD targeting pod, giving it capability to use the Paveway laser guided bomb family, and also some British indigenous laser bombs that nobody cares about. Also more importantly, you get access to the PGM TV guided rocket assisted bombs, for punishing retards who run back to their airfield instead of fighting your flying shit brick. You still get all the same air-to-air loadouts comprised of a grand total of 2 whole AIM-9Ls, and the usual 1200 pops of chaff as well. With the 11.7 tornadoes, the Giga Chaff strategy is even more potent than the early tornadoes, because in the full up tier to 12.7, you face the Tomcat and its stupid Phoenix, or Fakor depending on your luck, and more annoyingly, the MiG-29 and the Yak-141 with their R-27 ERs. Luckily, you have enough chaff to just ignore their missiles, especially if you set a funny macro like me to drop more chaff than the British drop stolen artifacts. You can practically negate any radar missile coming at you, unless it's a direct head-on. And after you're done tickling the enemy's balls and making Tomcat and MiG-29 players cry that their radar missiles don't work using your 1200 pops of party confetti, take a quick detour down to the open buffet restaurant known as the Enemy Airfield, and start munching on the free food provided there using your PGMs. Trust me, it's hilarious. My favorite loadout to bring on the IDS is the 2 BOZ pods, 2 AIM-9Ls, and 1 PGM plus the targeting pod. Yes, I know you don't need the targeting pod for the PGMs, and you could technically replace that targeting pod with a second PGM if you want, but keep in mind these are the early PGM models which don't have thermals or good zoom in the Seeker. So having the targeting pod to find the enemy plane in the first place is kinda nice to have. And if this thing sounds fun so far, oh god, get ready, because it's about to get even better. This is the Tornado GR.4 at 12.3, and before you scoff and turn away from a flying brick with 2 sidewinders at such a high BR, I need to tell you that this is easily the most fun plane I flew while making this video. Unlike those baby step upgrades we talked about earlier at 11.7, this thing jumps the gun and is upgraded so much that it needs to be a full BR higher than the early tornadoes. And by the way, when I said jump the gun, I literally mean it. This tornado loses one of its guns to accommodate a simple built-in targeting system in the nose. But you won't be using it anyways, because you get the advanced Lightning III targeting pod. In addition to that, your ground ordnance suite was fully overhauled. Let's ignore the shitty British laser bombs once again and look at the actually good ordnance. You get the Paveway 3 and the Paveway 4 dual mode bombs, which work as both GPS bombs like JDAM or as laser bombs like older Paveway 2s. You also get the Dash 3 series PGMs, which if you watched my last video on the Mirage 2000s, you would know why these are a big thing. Basically, you get Gen 3 thermals and incredible zoom in the Seeker of these PGMs, so you don't even need a targeting pod if you bring them. But personally, my favorite piece of ordnance in the new Tornado is the artificially nerfed Copium Farmer 9000, also known as the Brimstone. In real life, the Brimstones are these super powerful fire-and-forget automatic target seeking or man-in-the-loop guidance capable standoff missiles that can even act as loitering munitions in a way. However, because Gaijin didn't give us the Tank Battles Finisher 2000, Britbong mains on the forum started coping and seething and shitting their pants. Personally, with the Dash 3 PGMs, I think this thing is just fine for CAS either way, since the Brimstones have Hellfire Syndrome and don't one-shot tanks anyways. But we play air battles on this channel, so let's talk about this thing's upgrades in that department. First of all, instead of the usual AIM-9Ls, you get 2 AIM-9Ms with incredible IRCCM, making this plane the lowest BR supersonic plane in-game with AIM-9Ms. And the second lowest BR plane overall with AIM-9Ms. Not really my fault the other one is hella undertiered. And you're probably now thinking, what difference will the 9M make if the Tonka can't even get its nose on target to get a lock? Oh boy, do I have the answer to that one for you. The second upgrade in the air-to-air department is an HMD system. Why get the nose on target when you can just point your mouse at people and throw 9Ms at them in the stupidest aspects known to man? And as if that wasn't enough, the biggest problem with the Tornado in air-to-air was finally fixed. Remember how you had 1,200 chaff, which was nice and all, but those whole 58 flares really left you asking for more sometimes? Well, remember our buddies Terma, who made the funny PIDS pylon for the F-16 3 videos ago and gave it Maw and extra flares? Well, they cooked once again, so meet our new friend, the Terma MCP defensive pod. This pod does not have an electromechanical dispenser like the BOZ pod, but it has a lot of conventional flare and chaff dispensers built in, giving it 240 countermeasures, and on top of that, a full missile approach warning system. This, coupled with the BOL rails that Gaijin added right as I was about to finish this video originally, mean that the optimal selection on this Tornado is taking one BOZ pod and one Terma MCP pod, plus all the BOL rails, giving you 600 chaff and 588 flares in total, plus a complete MAW system to play with. This, coupled with the upgraded Mark 103 engine and the AIM-9M plus the HMD combo, means that this Tornado can actually work quite well in stupid rushes into the enemy team. Did I mention, the Brimstones are quite maneuverable, and due to being laser missiles, they are practically unflareable. You can do some of the funniest trolls with these missiles against enemy planes. My personal favorite loadout to run on this Tornado is one BOZ pod, one Terma MCP pod, the two AIM-9Ms, one PGM on the right side of the fuselage for removing idiots who are landing, one targeting pod with 3 Brimstones behind it on the other side to remove any idiots who slow down enough to die to an artificially nerfed Tesco meal deal Hellfire. Alternatively, since the GR4 got buffed while I was working on this video just to fuck with me some more, a new funny loadout now is just taking 15 fucking Brimstones for raping any plane that slows down below 800 km per hour, plus the usual 9Ms, BOL, BOZ, and Terma pods. But sadly, this gem of a plane is slept on, and so far the only people I have seen flying it in ARB are just other fellow content creators trying to get content with it for their
weapon loadout you can carry, especially the Brimstones, since they can also be used as air-to-air missiles. You can also carry over 1,200.
No, it's just Draconix. Yeah, kinda like that. It's a shame really, but it really makes sense considering this trolley playstyle isn't something that everyone finds fun. After all, skillful planes like this aren't everyone's cup of tea, and to some people, the idea of fun is to just have a severely overpowered and unmatched vehicle that can curb stomp the enemy team while their brain is turned off. But I don't like that. So now is the time to show you my favorite part about all the Tornadoes in-game by far. The Tornado has giant air brakes, but more importantly, it has high-power thrust reversers originally envisioned for shorter landings on highways during a war. However, in-game, these present the ultimate trolling tool in the Tornado's arsenal. Forget the PGMs, or the Brimstones, or the Gigachaff pods. The Tornado easily has the best mid-air deceleration ability at this battle rating by far, and using this, you can practically reverse any plane with very little effort, and even if they catch on to what you're doing and deploy their air brakes, it's always too late, and the thrust reverser is simply too much for them to handle. These 4th generation fighters beeline straight to the Tornado thinking it's a free kill for them, and while expecting to dance on it easily, they forgot one important detail about dancing. Let's just say, there's a reason that Gaijin named a whole song in the soundtrack The Waltz of the Tornado. So, remember how the Tornado was supposed to be a super duper multi-purpose all-in-one plane? Yeah, well, it kinda failed miserably at that, and the BAC was gonna call it a day. Then suddenly, the Ministry of Defense put out this banger called the RAF Air Staff Requirement 395, which called for a new interceptor for the Royal Air Force to replace the Lightning F6 and the Phantom FGR. The main requirements for this new interceptor was to have powerful BVR capability, a very strong radar, long loiter times and detection capability against Soviet bombers, and most importantly, not cost a lot of money because the MOD's budget was not in the best shape currently, after funding this absolute shitbrick of a plane called the Panavia Tornado. You might have heard of it before, not sure. Anyways, so, to keep costs down, Britain evaluated multiple American aircraft and somehow decided that none of them fit the requirements, which is fine. So what do you do when the F-15 isn't a good choice somehow? You make a directly worse equivalent for twice the fucking cost, of course. Anyways, BAC pitched the idea of a fighter Tornado to other countries involved in Panavia, and both of them decided to pass on the idea, seeing that turning what is already a joke of a plane into an air defense fighter was, to put it lightly, a horrible mistake. So this new fighter Tornado is now going to be funded completely by Britain, since they were the only ones who wanted it. Kinda defeats the purpose of having a multinational conglomerate to curb the flyaway costs of these planes. Man, the F-15 is literally right there, Britain, what the Anyways, the new Tornado would receive the designation of the Tornado F, instead of the Tornado GR, with F standing for fighter, and not for fat shit as expected. And fighting, it did. Fight the budget constraints, that is. Did you know that the first batch of Tornado F2s were delivered with literal concrete in the nose instead of an actual radar? No, I'm not talking about ballast for prototypes. Like, literally, the first batch of production model Tornado F2s legit just had concrete in the nose. And that concrete was even designated with its own rainbow code, like an actual radar. Just because the GEC Marconi Avionics AI Mark 24 Foxhunter Stage 2A Type W was instead being a Type L because of all the L's the development team was taking. And yeah, it wasn't ready yet. Anyways, other changes to the new fighter Tornado including lengthening the fuselage by 1.36 meters, removing one of the two guns so they could fit more missiles under the fuselage. Also, a byproduct of this was fitting a new fuel tank, except this fuel tank went before the number 1 fuel tank, so they literally just named it the number 0 fuel tank. They also made the air brakes slightly larger because of some drag rule or whatever physics shenanigans they were using to make the cinder block somehow fly. They also gave it better Mark 103 engines like on the Tornado GR.4 discussed earlier, and they removed the Kruger flaps in the wings for some reason. Yes, let's make the fighter variant of this plane less maneuverable for some fucking reason? I'm not joking when I say that this is genuinely the first time in the year and a half since I started this series where I actually facepalmed while doing the research for the video. Anyways, this new quote-unquote fighter variant was deemed, to put it lightly, absolute abysmal dogshit. So a new model, the F3, was quickly drawn up to fix a lot of the issues the F2 had. First of all, this new one carried 2 more missiles. Second, they stuck even better engines in it, the Mark 104s, with even more afterburner thrust. Third, they brought back the wing slats and Kruger flaps for very obvious reasons. They also added an automatic wing sweep computer to the thing, like the F-14 has, something that the earlier F2 and the Tornado IDS models did not have. And finally, and probably most importantly for the interceptor role, they actually put a radar in the nose instead of a giant slab of concrete. Look, I'm sorry, I just cannot get around how the Tornado F2 came in either concrete ballast or a lead ballast option instead of an actual radar. Anyways, with the issues basically ironed out, the Tornado F3 finally slated to enter serial production, and in 1989, the Tornado F3 was finally declared ready to enter service. And instantly, it turned out to be an even bigger pile of liquid horse shit than originally expected. And before I get Timothy McBritbong III in the comments glazing this incredible piece of British engineering, look, I understand it was built as a long-range, large-coverage, patrol fighter interceptor. What I find funny is how the Soviets had these same requirements for their new heavy fighter interceptor a decade before the ADV, and instead of a flying cinder block, they came up with one of the most maneuverable aircraft of its time. With better armament, may I add. I'm not even going to bring up the F-15, which just wipes the floor with both of those planes any day. Speaking of the F-15, this brings me to another funny Tornado story. Remember how Britain had to completely fund the ADV, or Air Defense variant, which they called the F-3? Well, in an attempt to recoup some of these costs, they tried to sell these ADVs to other countries. Nobody was stupid enough to buy them. Except the Saudis. And even then, from the original order of 24 Tornado ADVs, they received the first 8. Then realized how horribly dogshit these are, and cancelled the order and replaced them with more IDSs instead. and they just bought F-15s for the air defense role instead, which, by the way, was cheaper than the ATV. You know you done fucked up when even the Saudis cancel the order for your plane. Anyways, enough yapping, let's talk about this thing in-game. The Tornado ADV is available in 3 models in-game, 2 in the British tree and 1 in the Italian tree. The later British model is quite different, so it deserves its own section later in the video. So for now, let's focus on the F3 and the ADV, which are practically identical. The Tornado F3 is a British fighter interceptor that fails at both fighting and intercepting things thanks to being at 12.0. Before the quote-unquote BRD compression changes, these Tornadoes were actually quite good and a lot of fun. But nowadays, they're relegated to being dicked by Fakors and AMRAAMs and up-tiers constantly. That's not to say that they're bad, however, and with the aforementioned flight model buffs and especially the powerful Fox Hunter radar, which actually works in War Thunder, unlike in real life, the Tornado F3 isn't that bad of a plane to fly. I'm just a bit biased, because this thing used to be so fucking good before the BR changes. Like seriously, even with the old shitty flight model, this thing used to completely rape F5C monkeys. I only have a KDR of 12 in the Italian one, but now, it's mostly relegated to farming retarded F4S and MiG-23 players who don't know how to notch. And God forbid you get fully up-tier to face Fakors and AMRAAMs. Oh, did I mention, you no longer have the funny countermeasure pods from the Strike Tornadoes. Instead of the BOZ pods, you have BOL rails with the sidewinders and ALE-40 dispensers under the fuselage in the rear, giving you a generous 352 countermeasures to mix and match between flare and chaff, which I guess isn't as cool as the 1200 chaff and 58 flares on the Tornado IDS, but it is a lot more versatile. The Fox Hunter radar also has some of the most useful dogfight modes for its bore sight I have seen on any plane in-game that's not an F-15. So, not having an HMD isn't really a problem here when your ACM is just taller than Big Ben. The scanning speed ain't bad either, so this thing does a great job of finding the enemy first. The radar missile you get is the Skyflash Super Temp, an upgraded model of the Skyflash you're already used to from the British Phantoms. Or the Viggen, if you flew that. The Super Temp, which just stands for the Super Tornado Embodied Modifications Package, who the fuck cooks up these acronyms, is a very special model of the Skyflash with a second stage booster similar to the AIM-7F. It has less overall range than the AIM-7F and M. I'm not even going to bring up the R-27ER or the Super 530D. All in all, it's not a bad missile, but it's not really a good one either. And what it lacks in range, it does make up for maneuverability at least, and a lot of seeker power. Thanks to the incredible Fox Hunter radar, you can practically nail whatever you please below 15 kilometers with little chance that they'll be able to trash it away, unless they execute a perfect notch. This, coupled with the incredible top speed, decent high-speed loaded performance, powerful engines, and best of all, the funny thrust reverser. This makes the Tornado F3 a very potent killing machine and a great analog to the F4S at the same battle rating, trading the maneuverability for better IR missiles, better radar, and much more countermeasures. All in all, the Tornado F3 is a very quirky and unique quote-unquote fighter at the top ranks of War Thunder, and I definitely recommend people give it a try if they have the chance to see if they like it, because let me tell you something, I sure did. Alternatively, if you never grinded the British tree, then fear not, for there is also the Tornado ADV in the Italian tree. You see, when Britain, Germany, and Italy went to work on their next comically overpriced multi-purpose all-in-one super advanced jet to replace the last one, that one was also riddled with a plethora of development issues and delays. Gee, I wonder where we've seen that before. As a result, Italy was left with no real fighters to defend itself. No, Patrick, the F-104 Zaza is not a real fighter. Especially not when we're talking about a time when you had planes like the F-22 in service and the Su-35 undergoing testing. So, Italy really needed something for their fighter force that was slightly more capable than the Scuderia Ferrari promotional pen, and as a result, decided to rent fighters from other countries. Their first offer came from Britain, who offered to rent out a bunch of Tornado F3s for the Italian Air Force, which received the Tornado ADV name, similar to the Saudi ones. However, Italy quickly realized how ass they were, so these Tornadoes saw service for a grand total of about 2 years, before Italy returned them to Britain and kindly begged America to let them rent F-16s instead. Anyways, this is the Tornado ADV, and it's a completely identical carbon copy of the British tree Tornado F3, just in the Italian tree. Not much to talk about here, so now we're gonna move on to the ultimate fighter tornado. Right after the Tornado F-3 went into service, it was already deemed on the brink of obsolescence, and as a result, ideas for an upgrade program were instantly drawn up. It didn't help, however, that the Fox Hunter radar worked about as well as a BMW M3 with 120,000 kilometers on the odometer and a missing cylinder. As a result, various Tornadoes got various Fox Hunter upgrade or replacement parts throughout the first few years. Please keep this in mind because this will come back later. Anyways, in 1996, just 7 years after the F-3 entered service, the Capability Sustainment Program, or CSP, was announced to upgrade the Tornado to modern standards. I don't know what the British MOD was smoking, but I do want to point out that to sustain a capability, you need to have that capability, something, in first place. Oh, CSP costs 125 million British pounds? Oh yeah, okay, never mind. They're absolutely sustaining the capability of overrunning the budget and wasting more money on this piece of shit. Anyways, this CSP program was composed of two main parts. The first was the integration of new missiles, including the AIM-9M and the AIM-120 AMRAAM, and later the AIM-132 ASRAAM. And second, upgrading the fire control computers and the Fox Hunter radar to the Stage 3A standard, giving it compatibility with the AIM-120 AMRAAM. However, remember what we said about, 38 seconds ago, about how the Tornado's shitty Fox Hunter radar had all sorts of band-aid fixes and parts? Yeah, it turns out, in typical British fashion, none of this shit was really documented, and nobody really knew which Tornadoes got what parts or upgrades. So the exact term that Jack Nicholas used is fleets within fleets of Tornadoes. So, instead of actually fixing this problem, as with all previous examples we have seen, BAC just swept it under the rug. This directly resulted in the Fox Hunter being incompatible with providing mid-course corrections or having multiple data link channels for the AMRAAM, basically defeating the whole purpose of having the AMRAAM. A few years later, it was realized how stupid this is, and with the Typhoon yet again being slightly delayed, the AMRAAM Optimization Program, or AOP, was signed into action, being the second major overhaul of the Tornado F-3 in 5 years. This program fixed the Fox Hunter standardization issues and finally upgraded them to the proper Stage 3A standard, which finally gave the Tornado F-3 the mid-course correction and multi-missile data link abilities for the AMRAAM. There was also the ASRAAM integration later on, but that's not in-game yet. Speaking of in-game, so yeah, this is the Tornado F-3 late in-game. I don't know why they don't just call it the Tornado F-3 CSP, or the Tornado F-3 AOP, or something similar, considering it's literally that. But oh well. This thing sits at 13.3, just one BR step below top tier, with its 4 AIM-120s and 4 AIM-9Ms coupled with a great radar and the same 352 countermeasures as before. It's literally just the previous Tornado F-3, but with new missiles and a slightly better radar, more than a whole BR higher. But please, do not let this fool you. The two main issues with the Tornado F-3 are now fixed, being your lack of IRCCM missiles and the lack of good radar missiles to use the good radar with. Despite seemingly being such a dreadful BR, this thing is a hidden gem, embodying all that the Tornado's playstyle would really be if played correctly. No, you do not have the entire US Air Force and Vietnam supply of chaff, nor do you have the funny PGMs or brimstones, and you no longer sit at a BR where you can prey on retarded MiG-23ML and F-4S Wallet Warriors. Instead, the Tornado F-3 late earns its AMRAAMs and AIM-9Ms specifically so it could punish cocky F-15 and SU-27 players at this BR. Gone are the days where people see Tornado on their screen and instantly bum-rush straight to it for a free kill. With your 4 incredible IRCCM missiles coupled with 4 more AMRAAMs and an incredible radar and a shitload of countermeasures, you are exactly what the Tomcat wishes it was in terms of swing-wing BVR monsters. Also, I really can't help but find it funny that this is the same BR as the MiG-29 SMT, while having more missiles, better radar, and over 3 times the countermeasures, embodying the true playstyle of go fast and blast ass. If you are a fan of playing Guitar Hero with your keyboard's radar missile keybinds instead of learning how to dogfight people, then this is absolutely the plane for you. Tomcat players are crying in the corner every time you play this thing correctly, and with a top speed of over 2,000 stolen artifacts per cup of tea, going fast in a straight line is absolutely what this plane excels at. It's like the Britbongs looked at the MiG-25 and instead of taking inspiration from it to build the single best fighter plane of its era, they instead made a MiG-25 that kinda works. Kinda. Look, all I'm saying is, this thing is really slept on, and really isn't that bad of a plane. I dare say it's even a little fun, just clowning on the F-15 and SC-27 kiddos at top tier using a brick with wings. If God had wanted these top tier jets to live, he would not have let me strap AMRAAMs to my flying cinder block. Okay, let's spade your new swing bong battle bus now. Starting with the 11.3 Tornado IDS, the German one comes spaded already, you little pay-to-win scrublord, so don't worry, I won't tell anyone, I have that thing too. As for the Italian factory model and the German event Marineflieger, they're literally the same with the exception of the Marineflieger getting the AS-34 Cormoran anti-ship missiles as a modification on the side. And since they all get their air-to-air missiles stock, start with flare chaff to get your funny 1200 chaff pops. Next get the G-suit, then new boosters, bombs, wings repair, cover, engine, and EFS before going back to get whatever you want. If you want to play the Marineflieger in Sim, make sure to also pick up the Cormoran sometime. Moving on to the 11.7 Midlife Strike Tornado, they all have the same modifications tree with minor variations in ground ordnance. Once again, start with flare chaff, followed by G-suit and targeting pod, whatever model your country gets. Then work your way down the rest of the performance mods while also getting the top ground ordnance on each plane to remove idiots on the runway. That would be the PGMs for the British one, the ASSTA 3 modification for laser JDAMs on the German one, and just normal paveways on the Italian one. After this, go back and work on whatever is left. For the Tornado GR.4, a bunch of stuff was shuffled around to fit it all in one window, but don't let it fool you. It's quite similar to previous Tornadoes. Start with flare chaff, then get the MAW modification to unlock the Terma MCP pod with more flares and the MAW system. Then get the G-suit and the AIM-9M, before going back to work on the remaining performance modifications and pushing down the ground ordnance line, starting with the Lightning 3 pod and moving down to the PGMs and Brimstones. After that, go back and work on whatever you like. For the air-to-air Tornadoes at 12.0, start with flare chaff BOL rails, then the AIM-9L and the G-suit. After that, move to rank 3 and get the Skyflash and the wings repair. Due to the very low amount of overall modifications on these planes, you only need 2 modifications at this tier instead of the usual 3 to move on to rank 4. So, after these 2 modifications, get the Skyflash Super Temp right away, then the engine, EFS, and then go back and work on the rest of the performance mods. Finally, on the upgraded Tornado F.3 CSP, or late, or AOP, or whatever the fuck you want to call it, start once again with flare/chaff BOL rails. Then get the AIM-9L and the AIM-9M. After that, get the Skyflash Super Temp, wings repair, AMRAM, G-suit, engine, EFS, then go back and work on the rest of the modifications. You may notice we left the G-suit for quite a while later, and that's because, let's be real here, you won't be turning hard enough to black out half the time while cruising at Mach 1.2 throwing AMRAMs at the first radar contact you see. Peak gameplay. And really, you don't want to be turning with F-15s, Gripens, and SC-27s. Trust me. Anyways, that's the Tornado family in War Thunder spaded and ready to rumble now. Some people only care about military aviation for the wacky designs and their spectacular crashes, and how for every good and successful plane, there was probably tens, if not hundreds, that failed hilariously. I can really understand the appeal of that. While it's easy to write this off as mindless carnage, there is something spectacular about it on a deeper level. You see, in aviation, there are plenty of stories of glory and successful aircraft, but the wisest lessons are always taught by catastrophic failure. In order to truly appreciate something for its greatness, you have to witness it at its most dysfunctional. In tense moments, the accidents tell us more than any kill-death ratio or national propaganda ever could. And it's from these accidents and failures that aviation learns from its mistakes and forges a future defying all norms and imagination of its time, creating a truly spectacular aircraft that builds on all the mistakes learned from its predecessors. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe. It means a lot to me. Also, feel free to join our Discord server to vote for what plane the next video is going to be about. Now, I'm just going to sit and wait for Gaijin to add a Saudi tornado to make this video outdated. And until that happens, go out there, don't crash on takeoff, and go show those pesky dogfighters what the flying telephone box can do when it throws it back and busts it down thrust reverser style. See you next time.